Welcome back, everyone. This episode, I'm going to talk about the position players' power rankings. We did the pitchers last episode. Last year, I did a ton of episodes since it was the first time ever. This year, I'm only going to do a couple, though, for the entire, all the positions, just because we talked about almost all the same guys last year, so just keep kind of going over and not a ton of changes from the elite guys. I just thought I'd highlight some of the guys this year that got added in from that weren't on the list last year. Some big additions. So who's playing a lot better? So last year we'll start with catcher here. So last year we had Drew Romo number one, and he's number one again. The season Drew Romo's having is absolutely ridiculous. The dude's having the best defensive season I've ever seen of a catcher. He only has one error in 700 innings. He has over 10 range factor, 999 fielding percentage, over 4 zone range from catcher, 1200 efficiency, only 3 pass balls, and he's thrown out 45% of runners, and that's a lot of runners thrown out. Most guys only have like 5 or 10. So just an absolutely outrageous defensive season out of him. It's just ridiculous the value he brings. With how overpowered catcher ability is in this game, he might be the best player in the game, but it doesn't matter a ton because we're switching to the new game here soon. And in 2023, I've heard the catchability is neutered quite a bit. Some saying it's only worth about 30% of what it was worth in this game, like heavily neutered. So it shouldn't make him and Hedges, those two guys, so overpowered in next game. But Romo will probably still be a top 3 catcher in the game just because defense is still important in catcher. And for how overpowered it is, even if it's only like 1/3 as powerful, it's still pretty valuable. And he's one of the better offensive catchers in the league with 100 OPS plus. So probably still be top 3 on this list for sure. But in this game, it's just a far and away. Him and Hedges are just ridiculous. Hedges, same as always, just leading that Arizona team that says very questionable pitchers to somehow be like first place yet again in a dominant NL West division. So Hedges is just a freak too. So he's kept those two the same. Next up, we have Adley Rushman. Adley Rushman leads all catchers in WAR this season. Rushman is just a freak offensively, on pace for 30 home runs again, 27, 30, and on pace 29 this season. So just an absolute monster offensively. The guy's just turned into a perennial all-star. Really, really cool player. I love his profile. Next up, we have Kyber Ruiz. He jumped. Joey Bart's having a kind of a down year, so we had Kyber Ruiz jump up pretty high here in this list. He's second in catcher WAR. He's on pace for over 4 WAR, over 20 home runs, batting average of 300. Super duper offensive catcher with a 130 OPS plus. Pretty crazy. So pretty solid stats offensively. The defense, as you can see, the catch ERA is almost a full point higher every single game. That's pretty much like another half run compared to those top elite guys that we talked about, Romo and Hedges. That's the difference of why some of these guys are 4 or 5 on this list compared to those elite guys. Next up, we have Danny Jansen. So Danny Jansen was kind of underrated for a couple of years there. Didn't get a ton of money in free agency. Colorado made a couple moves bringing him back. And then finally last year, he wasn't doing super well in Colorado. As you can see, the year before, he hit 17 home runs and 111 WRC plus. And then he just really struggled in about 112 plate appearances the next year. And then they shipped him off to Atlanta. And then he adjusted, and then this is his first full season after training camp in Atlanta. And he's just been probably the main difference of why Atlanta's just broken out so much, having that super duper 70 defensive rated captain catcher behind the plate. Just an absolute freak. Over 100 OPS plus defensively. Been pretty solid, like 4 catcher ERA. 10 errors, though. It's been a little questionable, but it doesn't really matter when your offense is that good and you have such a good pitching staff. So he's been a huge factor there in some of their success, and probably a reason their winning percentage is so much higher than it's been in years past, even with a really similar lineup. So Jansen got reward for Atlanta's hot start. Real Muto fell down a little bit. He lost his power. If you see Real Muto, he's still an awesome defensive catcher. He just lost some of his powers down to 50, and you can see it in home runs. Went from 16 and half season. That was just a half season, I think. In 2025, yeah, he had 16, then he had 30 last year in a crazy year, and then this year he's on pace for only like 10 or something. So you definitely notice that power go down a little bit, and that just changes his profile a bit from like an elite like 5 WAR guy to kind of like a 1 or 2 WAR guy. But he's still really, really solid just with how good his defense is. Hasn't gone down in that at all. Joey Bart's still next up. And then, as you can see, all the red are new guys. So the red is guys that have entered the fray as top 15 catchers. We have Ali Sanchez, who I probably should have had in the list last year, 10 or 11. Really good player in Colorado there, catching an awesome staff. Patrick Bailey's had a ridiculous offensive year in Boston. I think in the new game, when offense more important to catcher, the catchability is neutered quite a bit. I think Bailey will probably be like a top 5 catcher in the game. In a year or two, when some of these older guys age, like Real Muto and Jansen and that, I think Bailey's such a freak offensively. Will Smith is having a crazy season. I'll pull him up here. I always like to talk about Will Smith. Will Smith is been traded to Toronto and has 11 home runs in 40 games. Been a freak, 130 OPS plus in both stops this year in the Dodgers and Toronto. It's kind of got traded twice this year already, which is crazy. But yeah, absolute freak since that trade. Really helped out Toronto, and they got one of the best records in the AL since. So it was a huge addition there. So he deserved his spot in the list. And then you got Amaya, Joe Nixon, a couple of really good catchers for the commissioners team here in the New Orleans Voodoo. You got Joe Nixon and Langelier splitting time. They're both awesome. Langelier is one of the best defensive catchers in the game. Nixon's a freak too, with 65 ability and really good offense, two-way player. Vasquez is having a huge year in Oakland, leading them to a huge season there in first place now in the West. And then you got Austin Barnes and Reese McGuire having pretty good seasons with the high catchability veterans there with good pitching staffs. And then Cal Raleigh finishes off the list. So you have a bunch of about 15, 17 good guys. There's a huge tier jump from the top. Probably about the top 3 are really elite, and then 4, 5, 6, 7 are really good players. And then you get kind of a huge tier of like really similar players here from like 8 to 17. A couple guys that could easily be on this list, like Marino and that, but I didn't want to go. I kind of already went a little farther than I wanted. I was thinking like top 10, top 12, but it's just kind of fun adding a few guys to this list. So next up we have DH. DH is really a similar list last year. Pena, Ohtani, Alvarez, Vaughn, obviously the big bats we all know and love. The crazy one here is Cesar Ramirez. Cesar Ramirez has had a freakish season. He's hitting 388 as a rookie. He was a Rule 5 draft pick, and he's never played more than 32 starts above high A. And he jumps right to the majors and hits 380. So this in real life would be like an Ichiro phenomena almost. His nickname is Fertile, which is interesting. The dude has crazy profile. He only sees 2.9 pitch per plate appearances, which was as low as I've ever seen. But it doesn't matter because he just hits everything he swings at. It's like a young Vladimir Guerrero that just doesn't need to walk much but hit everything he swings at. So just an absolute freak. Those are about the lowest ratios you'll ever see. 4%, 6%. So that means 90% of plate appearances he's not walking or striking out, which is crazy if you think about it. So that means in 90% of plate appearances he's making contact and usually getting out. And then with you do that with a 400 bat pit, that's a lot of hits. So just a crazy profile. Some athleticism there, good base runner. Only has 35 speed, but has pretty good base running and stealing range. So just a really weird player, but having a monster season as a DH. Can't really play super defense. He's okay at third base, but Pittsburgh's always got really good defensive infielders, so he can't quite start over those guys. So he's just been playing DH there. But what a freak he is. Next up, we have Albert Figuero converted to DH. He lost a lot of that second field range. I think it's down to like 40 or 45, so he's kind of like a first baseman, but he's only 5'8", so kind of gets stuck at DH there. McAfee is playing a lot of DH there too in Detroit. Tom Smith's having a huge year here with like 25 home runs for the Yankees. Altuve's having a nice year at 280, and Calhoun's having a huge year. So those guys are kind of like the main tier, and I almost left these underneath guys off, but I just kind of threw them in. They're having a little bit down seasons, but all pretty good players, so I just kind of, that's why I had that space there as like a tier jump. And then you got Varsho having a really bad year. Still a really good player, though. Same with Reese getting injured a lot. Bobichette, Hare. Well, then these guys have a lot of bat talent, just having not so hot years, so I didn't throw him in the top 10 there. Next up, we have first baseman. First baseman, I jumped Freddie Freeman all the way number 2. He's having a monster season. Freddie Freeman is hitting like 330 or something stupid and on pace for like 7 WAR at first base. Vladdy Guerrero still gets nod as first place. Just he's hitting like 350. Lux is a freak. Weber is a freak. Always those guys are hitting like 300. Huge doubles numbers, everything. The big jump on this list is the young guys. Miranda and Tristo, both like 22, 23 years old. Huge seasons out of them. Matt Olson's next up. Gavin Sheets jumped up on the list, having a huge year. Pretty good defensively and got a really nice eye power combination there. Bregman just got traded to Pittsburgh. Bregman is going to be, I'd imagine, a first base or DH in Pittsburgh. He's a beast. Rizzo's having a down year, but he's just so talented. I had to throw him on this list still. The ratings are still there. It's just a hard stadium to hit in New York Mets, but really good player with all 60 ratings. Shoemake is a really interesting addition. I didn't expect him to be on this list until I looked how insane he was defensively. He has just got like 80 defense, and he's on pace to win a Gold Glove. He's got crazy defense ratings and pretty solid bat. So it makes him like a decent like 3 WAR player. So I thought he deserved to be on this list as he's one of the highest WAR total first basemen. Tristan Casas on pace for like 50 home runs, but he's only on base percentage like 290. So couldn't really be much higher in this list as a first baseman at 290 on base, but really powerful bat. Really awesome for the Chicago Cubs there. And then next up you got Batty in Cleveland. Batty's got a pretty cool profile. He's got a lot of power and eye. Nice young bat there. So he's he's not that young, but really good, solid addition to this list. I figured got some on base percentage there. Alonso and Peters both having pretty big down years. I'd imagine Peters will probably be top 5 on this list in a year or two once Freeman and some of those older guys age. I think Peters has got one of the best ratings in the league, so he probably won't have too many down years after this. A really, really good young player. Next up, we have second baseman. Second baseman, we have Hudson Potts took the top of the list here. He's having not quite the dominant year he did last year. Had a big injury at the start of the year, missed some time, but still just such a freak. He had to be number one on this list. A second baseman can hit like 40, 50 home runs every season with solid defense. Just an absolute freak. The big jump here was Marte jumped all the way from like 13 on my list last year to like number 2. He has really progressed. He's on pace for like 5 WAR this season. He's had a beast year. I'm going to actually go back to these ratings for you guys and show. We're going to go show you guys the WAR ratings per position. So Marte actually leads the league now after this last sim in WAR. He's on pace for 5.5 WAR. Absolute freak. The crazy thing is he's actually had 80 base running, and he has terrible base running stats this year. So he's actually playing a little bit worse than he should on the base pass. But everything else, offensively, he's on pace for 26 home runs, over 200 ISO, .30 OPS plus. Just a freak. It really is like a clone of that Adames profile that won the Gold Glove, Silver Slugger like 6 years in a row. So Marte at 25 years old might be set to have a pretty big run there at second base in the NL, as there's not a ton of really elite second basemen in the NL to kind of challenge him in the next few years, because Gillorm and Horner are both above 30. And then no one else on this list is an AL guy all the way till Walker, who's about 30 years old. So I could imagine I wouldn't be surprised one bit if Marte just went on a crazy run and was the best second baseman in AL for a long time here. He's an absolute freak. And then, as you see, Mauricio's having a monster season. He's also on pace for pretty similar, just not quite the power that Marte has, but he has a big-time bat contact for a second baseman, on pace for 20 steals. Just a huge, huge addition to any lineup, just with a lot of athleticism, a lot of on-base percentage, just a really good offensive player, position that normally doesn't have that top-notch offense. So really good there. Adames still on this list. He's lost a lot of his power. He's only on pace for like 5 or 10 home runs, but still an elite defensive guy with some contact. Not quite the bat those other guys above him on the list have right now, though, at this age. Gilmore is a freak, just a ton of singles, hits really well, has huge bat pip, isn't quite a big power hitter anymore, 35 power now, but still a super elite defense, nice contact guy. Nico Horner's about the same thing. He's hitting like 300, getting on base a ton of base hits. Baez on pace like 25 home runs, just a beast. Second base, shortstop type combination. Freeman's kind of the same as those other guys I mentioned, just a ton of bat on ball skill, not a ton of power, but average defense to above average with nice on base percentage. Seager probably could be number 2 or 3 on this list. If he was healthy more. He's wrecked, so I always kind of bump him down a bit because he only plays about 100 games a year. It takes away from a lot of his value. But if he's healthy in the playoffs, talent-wise, he's probably right up there with Marte and Potts, like number 2, even maybe above Marte. Like a 4 or 5 WAR guy if he played 150 games. An absolute freak with the bat, 65 contacts, nice power, elite 65 range on defense. So just when healthy, just an elite player, but I bumped him down quite a bit. I moved Rosario down to number 8 just because he's injured and missed the year, but he was on pace for like a 4 WAR season at second base there. Really good with 60 contact and some nice power for me. I was expecting a huge year out of him. Hopefully he comes back next year. I got a $14 million player option. Just an absolute freak at second base. So he got away with shortstop for a few years there, so I thought he'd be a real plus second baseman. Unfortunately, he's out for the year with injury, so I have both those guys a little injury prone, obviously. Walker's having a pretty big year. Urias having a nice 3 WAR season in Milwaukee. And then you got the real defensive specialist there in Colorado. And then I threw Rengifo on there at second base. He's playing shortstop this year, but probably would be a 2 or 3 WAR second baseman. So figured he'd probably be right around that number 15 mark there. So kind of add a few guys on the list. I didn't really have to, but I thought it'd probably be worth adding them. A nice 3 WAR seasons out of those guys. So all the red guys are the new additions there. Next up, we have third base. Arenado is number 1 on this list. He jumped Fernando Tatis from last year. Arenado is just having a monster season. I thought he deserved it, especially with how well San Francisco played. Made a World Series last year and has been their best player this year, even over Potts and those guys. So just an absolute freak at 312 batting average at his age, 36 years old. Still has a ton of power on his 30 home runs. Still the best defensive third baseman in baseball. He's a really, really elite player, future Hall of Famer. He must be over 60 career WAR, 74 career WAR now, just amazing. So yeah, he deserved number 1 spot over Tatis, who doesn't seem to be playing up to his potential quite as much, even though he's still really good. He's starting to hit a lot better lately. He was hitting like 260 for a while. Wasn't a ton of power this year, but he's really heated up lately, so he's back to being on pace for a high 30s. So really close to Arenado, but Arenado definitely deserved to be ahead of him this year with how that crazy start he's had. Tatis still a freak, though, at number 2. And then number 3, you get on this list Moncada jumped Devers. I think Moncada was just been so consistent, like back on pace for like a 6 WAR season. He must have had a bad sin this week, but last time I looked, he was on pace for like 6.1. So Moncada, Devers are pretty close here. I thought I'd reward Moncada though, just because he's having such a good season. Devers had a big injury, so I put Devers down a spot. Both really, really close though. And then the big new addition is Drew Bianco. He had a big season-ending injury last year in Cleveland. Monster profile, ton of power, ton of power and a ton of explosiveness on base percentage. As you can see here, he was on pace. He's hitting 240 ISO, 4.1 pitch per plate appearances, on pace for like 4 WAR. So unfortunately, he didn't have an injury. Sorry, I was getting mixed up with somebody. I thought he had a. Oh, it was last year I was talking about. Sorry, but yeah, really, really good player there. Next up on the list, we have Juan Franco. Franco's really not been quite as dominant as he has been in real life in the game. He switched over to third base, and he's only hitting like 270 from like a 6'5" contact guy. He's lost a little bit of eye from earlier in his career when he was like 60 potential. Never got above like 50 current though, but he's just having quite a bit of a down year there. He probably should be like a 320 hitter with that profile, but such high avoid K and athleticism. I would expect a big bounce back next year, and wouldn't be surprised if he was way higher in this list. He could play anywhere in the infield too, be a really good second baseman, shortstop, third baseman. So definitely a guy that could see jumping up a few spots here in the next few years, depending on where he plays. The big addition, jump up on the list, was Brady House. Brady House jumped from out of the top 10 on my list last year to right up in the list this year. Brady House is an absolute freak. He's one of my favorite players in that draft class. He actually got drafted above Leto and Meyer in the draft, so he better be pretty good, or else that's going to sting. But he has been really solid this year, on pace for almost 5 WAR. Big power, big athlete at third base there, has 80 base running. So just a really good all-around player there. So he deserved a spot pretty high on that list, I thought. And then you got Kyber having a huge year. Ozzie Albies having a huge year. Third base in Arizona. Doughty's having a bit of a down year, so he fell a couple spots on this list from last year. Manny Machado's still about the same as he was last year, 8-9. Hayes having quite a bit of a down year for the second year in a row. He's an MVP guy candidate a couple years ago, and then he's had a couple average years. But he's talent-wise, he could be a couple spots higher in this list too. And then Perdomo's having a nice contact year in Atlanta, on pace for 3 or 4 WAR. And then you got these guys at the bottom here, kind of like 3 WAR seasons. But definitely another one of those things was a big tier jump. Those top 4, really, really elite. And then these 3 are kind of the next tier, like 4 WAR guys, maybe 4.5 type guys. And then you have that next tier with like the kind of like solid guys, not a huge tier jump. Really, it's just those top like 3 or 4, like legit 7 WAR, 6 WAR type guys almost every season. And then I think Bianco will probably join that group in the next year here when he reaches his potentials, and Franco's probably could be in that group too. And then you get all these guys that are pretty similar, like 3 to 5 WAR players. So that's kind of the tiers there. Shortstop was kind of disappointing to do. Last year was the most fun position group, and this year a lot of them started playing like crap and moved around a little bit. Some of them moved to second base. Some of them just had really big down years, like some of these guys here hitting like 210 and stuff. So Pawson's kind of jumped into a tier zone as like an elite player, almost on pace for like 10 WAR. He's on pace for like 50 home runs and 75 range at shortstop. Just inarguably just one of the best players in the league. Leto's only having a down year. He's still number 2 though. He's just such a freak. I put Napier at third, short, even though he's not listed second base, even though that's where he plays in Arizona. I just figure he'd probably be like third best shortstop in the league. I kind of want to put the guys on the list where they're probably like the best at, so he can play either second or short. I just figure most teams he would probably be the starting shortstop, so I threw him there in the ratings. But he's doing really well at second base. Doesn't really matter when you can kind of play both. They went with a more defensive shortstop and heavy bat there at second, but can't go wrong with either. You can play either. But yeah, he's number 3 on that list. Obviously, those top 3 are kind of in a tier of their own. Those guys are absolute freaks. All like, Pawson's kind of in his own tier, and then Leto and Napier are both like 6-7 WAR guys too. Pawson's more like a 10-11 WAR guy. He's just an absolute freak. Should be like a multiple time MVP the next few years here. And then the huge jump here was Ernest Rodriguez. I'm really glad I threw him in the list last year. I threw him at like 13 or 14 last year, super young, debuted really late, had like 1 WAR, but he just had such a high ceiling. I want to have him on the list, and I'm glad I did because he jumped all the way to number 4 this season. Ramirez is just has a crazy skill set at shortstop with the power. His power is insane. He's number 4 in shortstop WAR. He's on pace for 4 WAR and 45 home runs. He's only hitting 220, so if he can just get a bit better contact-wise in the next few years, he could be like a 6-7 WAR guy. But with that kind of power, he could just keep getting like 3-4 WAR, hitting like 220, 230 every year. Unfortunately, he's fragile, but shouldn't make a huge difference. If he can play like 120 games a year, that's all good. So I actually jumped him above Meyer just because Meyer was having such a bad year. Marcelo Meyer was hitting really, really bad last time I looked, way down on the WAR rankings. So I didn't think he deserved to be above Ramirez, who's on pace for 45 home runs. But Meyer's starting to recover a little bit. He was hitting like 180 at one point, but definitely a bit of a down year. But he's still too talented to fall much farther. Same with Acosta. Acosta wasn't quite as good as he was last year. He's still pretty solid though. Still on pace for 3 WAR, but last year, a couple of years, had 4 and 5 WAR seasons. Hit like 280 last year, down to 250 this year. Just a little bit less, like 30 less on base OPS plus. So just another guy that just hasn't quite played as well as he did last year. Howard's having a big year. Garcia's having a big year. And then you got Pacheco is only like a 195, 200 hitter this year. Another guy that's really struggled with contact. Hasn't had that huge year like he did last year. He had like 6 WAR. Xavier Edwards, I probably could have a little higher in this list. I figure he's playing a little above his talent level. I just didn't think defensively he was quite elite enough to be up there with those guys above him that are such better defenders. He's like a 60 range guy. These guys are all like 65, 70s. So I think Edwards more of a second baseman, but I think, I just couldn't really put him above these guys that had like 7 more year last year. They were just having a little bit down year this season, but he could be, you could argue with the crazy season he's having, he could be a little higher in this list. I think he's like number 2, 3 in WAR this season. It's crazy 300 hitter with 8 home runs, so crazy good base runner and 40 stolen base pace. So just kind of a pretty awesome player. But I just didn't think you could argue a little bit with that rating for sure. And then Machado's having a really down year. He's hitting like 210, but a guy that talent-wise could be in the top 6 or 7 for sure. And then you have a lot of these guys just having really bad years. They're all defensive specialists, so I threw them on the list because they're still really top-notch defensive shortstops. So pretty much all these guys are like 70, 75 range. Simmons, Yarbrough, Reyes, and all those guys. My guy Kim's having a big year. Low contact, super high power. And then Royce Lewis is always injured, so he probably should be a little lower in this list. But just kind of talent-wise, he's probably around that area, number 20 in the league. Pretty talented guy. If he stayed healthy the whole year, probably like a 4 WAR guy. And then you got a couple defensive specialists that are like 2, 3 WAR guys here at the bottom. Perez is having a big year for a young guy. He's really young, so that's really cool to see. Anyways, that'll be it for this episode. I don't want to keep rambling for too long. I'll make the outfielders in another episode and then go over the top 30 players in baseball on my overall list. So that'll be it for now. Cheers.